On 11 December, the Supreme Court is set to pronounce its judgment on a batch of petitions which challenge the abrogation of Article 370 of the Constitution back in 2019. A 5-judge Constitution bench will deliver this judgment. You can see the names of the judges on your screens right now. So before the judgment comes, here's a quick recap for you for what happened in August 2019 and what are the issues that the Supreme Court is going to be looking at. Now let's rewind back to 5th August 2019. Almost 4 years ago, India redefined its relationship with Kashmir after 7 decades. At around 11 am on 5th August, Union Home Minister Amit Shah announced in the Rajya Sabha that the government had decided to do away with the Jammu and Kashmir special status. 2 presidential orders were then issued, effectively scrapping Article 370 and Article 35A of the Constitution. What are these 2 articles? Article 370 accorded a special status to the erstwhile state of Jammu and Kashmir within the Indian Union. There's of course a lot of history attached to this article. It followed attempts to bring independent provinces under the Indian Union after British colonial rule over the subcontinent ended in 1947. And Article 370 was then introduced. It was titled Temporary Provisions with respect to the state of Jammu and Kashmir. It essentially exempted Jammu and Kashmir from provisions of the Indian Constitution, allowing it to frame its own constitution. It also spoke about the applicability of central laws to the state. So the parliament needed the state government's concurrence for applying laws to the state, except for laws which dealt with defense, foreign affairs, finance and communications. So only certain laws could be implemented in the state directly. It also gave the power to the president to apply different provisions of the constitution to the state, but this also required the president to get the Jammu and Kashmir government's concurrence before issuing such an order. And clause 3 of the Article 370 is the most controversial and probably the most significant in this whole argument. It said that it is necessary for the president to take the recommendation of the Constituent Assembly of the state before declaring the provision inoperative. And this is actually how change was brought about in this article. How this was done is that the then president back in 2019 issued an order called Constitutional Order 272, amending Article 367 of the Constitution. Now you would wonder why this new article suddenly in this whole milieu of several articles. This article essentially deals with the interpretation of the Constitution. So now this amendment said that the reference to Constituent Assembly in Article 370 would mean Legislative Assembly. So that's how this paved the way for changes to Article 370 itself, because now they didn't need the permission of the Constituent Assembly of the state, which of course doesn't exist anymore. Within hours of the president issuing CO 272, Rajya Sabha recommended that Article 370 should cease to operate. At the time, Jammu and Kashmir, now again because I said Constituent Assembly should be read as Legislative Assembly. Another important point here is that at that time, Jammu and Kashmir was actually under the President's rule. So on 6th August 2019, the President then, instead of the Legislative Assembly, because the state was under President's rule, the President, on the recommendation of the Rajya Sabha, issued another order, CO 273, effectively declaring that Article 370 would cease to operate. As for Article 35A, it was introduced through a presidential order in 1954, allowing the Jammu and Kashmir legislature to decide who all are the permanent residents of the state. So this was the article that formed the foundation and the basis of all the special rights and privileges that could be granted to the residents of the state in public sector jobs, acquisition of property in the state, scholarship and other public aid and welfare. Now, on 9th August, the Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization Act was also passed. The law bifurcated the state into 2 union territories, the Union Territory of Ladakh and the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. All of these moves were challenged before the Supreme Court soon after. The bench reserved its verdict on 5th September this year after hearing the case for 16 long days starting 2nd August this year. Now let me tell you a little bit about the arguments in the case. The petitioners began by stressing on the unique nature of Jammu and Kashmir's relationship with India, which got embodied in the Indian constitutional setup, highlighting that the Maharaja of Jammu and Kashmir did not give up the internal sovereignty to the Dominion of India. They argued that Article 370 was no longer a temporary provision and had now assumed permanent status after the dissolution of the Jammu and Kashmir Constituent Assembly in 1957. They also asserted that the Indian Parliament cannot convert itself into a constituent assembly through an amendment. They essentially raised several questions over the constitutionality of the whole process with which Article 370 was abrogated and changes were made and the state was turned into two union territories. As for the second bit about Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization Act, the petitioners contended that Article 3 of the Constitution, which you can see on your screens right now, it grants the power to the Parliament to alter the boundaries of states and even create smaller states through bifurcation. But the petitioners said that this article had never before been used to convert an entire state into a union territory. Now, as against this, the central government told the Supreme Court that the provision was always meant to be temporary and that its abrogation was the ultimate step towards complete integration of Jammu and Kashmir with India. It contended that Jammu and Kashmir was only converted to a union territory owing to it being a sensitive border state for a temporary period of time and that its statehood would be restored at some point. Its arguments also centered around, it said, the positive outcomes since the repeal of Article 370 in August 2019 and said that elections were due, indicating a path towards the restoration of full statehood once normalcy was established in the state. So now you have a full recap of what happened in 2019 and what was argued before the Supreme Court. We will keep an eye out on what the Supreme Court finally says. So do check out our YouTube channel and our website for articles and videos on this. Thank you so much for watching.